Today we're going to talk about writing the methods section of an empirical research report. It might be helpful before you begin to find examples from other articles that are peer-reviewed, use APA style, and describe an empirical study. So you might look for papers that are organized in a way that is similar to how you might organize your own paper. So if you're doing a correlational study with two main variables and seeing if they're correlated, you might look for a paper that does a similar thing. If you're doing an experimental paper where there are two conditions in your independent variable and one dependent variable, you can look for a paper similar to that, and it might help. So be sure to analyze how they're formatted and organized so that you can get familiar with how to say things using the jargon in your field. In our field, my field is psychology. You might think about the fact that plagiarism is not using typical psychology words. So when you read an article and it says 100 participants were recruited for this study, that's actually a normal way of saying things in our field. So it's not plagiarism to use the same wording. It's actually considered rather appropriate. Now, if you lift an entire method section from someone else and just do it exactly the same, yeah, that probably is plagiarism. The purpose of the method section is to describe the design of the study, describe the research study participants, describe the measures or instruments that are used, and describe the procedure. So we'll talk about each of those in a moment. One of the goals of a well-written method section is that someone else should be able to critique your study method and replicate it. So you want to have just enough information for them to do a very similar kind of replication. But it doesn't need as much detail as some undergrads think. If it helps, you can think of a method section as being like a recipe in a cookbook. It has ingredients and it has procedure in it, but you don't tell the author or the audience, what background research you did in the method section. So we usually break up a method section into participants, procedure, measures, or materials, and sometimes even an analysis plan. If you're doing a kind of study where that just doesn't work at all, you don't need to use that. You can use something slightly different. Usually student papers are rather short in length. At least students that I work with usually have a rather short method section, and they're often surprised by that. In a method section, APA style is used in psychology, and if you want to know how to type APA style out correctly in your paper, you can go online and find some information or look at other resources, and it'll tell you when to capitalize, when to center, when to underline headings and subheadings in a method section. You can find an example of a method section, and I've included one here where you can just take off the box and you'll see somebody else's method section. I'm going to leave them for you to go ahead and look at before you move on to the next video.